r/AskReddit, nsfw, which celebrity went on the fastest, hardest, and most destructive downward spiral from their peak? Ezra Miller is doing a speedrun on this ATM. Kevin Spacey getting revealed to be a predator, using his sexuality as an excuse, getting fired from his projects and then posting an insane supervillain level YouTube video as Frank Underwood basically blaming the viewers for being complicit. Mark Salling, the guy who played Puck in Glee. Maybe not the biggest star, but he was a fan favorite on a huge show. Got caught with child pornography, pleaded guilty, then hung himself. That's a pretty hard downward spiral. Jared Fogle, the subway guy. The things discovered about him are quite disturbing. Prison is an appropriate place for him. I think of Chris Farley. His SNL career started in '92. His real break came with Tommy Boy in '94. Dead by '98 at 33 years old. Horribly addicted to drugs, alcohol, food, and other impulse-related stuff probably. Probably gained 100 pounds in his 6-year run. OD'd on a speedball, as everyone seems to. Everybody of that era claims he was the funniest guy they've ever known, and most of them talk about being frustrated both by his lack of any self-worth, despite how beloved he was, and a feeling of inevitability about his early demise. Obviously Chris wasn't destructive like some of the other scumbags mentioned on this thing. He was simply self-destructive. People like to compare him to John Belushi. They had pretty much the same self-destructive trajectories, both fat dudes, both highly energetic performers. But as people I think they were very different. I think he's more comparable to Robin Williams. They both had this like insatiable need to make people laugh, and they both had this superhuman energy. By all accounts Chris, like Robin, was an incredibly sweet and sensitive person in private life. Apparently had spent a lot of time volunteering at children's hospitals in Madison, Wisconsin, and he didn't even talk about it. I've heard a million takes on Farley, and it's always heartbreaking, and telling that 25 years later, people still talk about it and can't get over it. Armie Hammer. And apparently Ezra Miller is just batshit. Tila Tequila going from bisexual reality TV vixen to Nazi was pretty astonishing. John Wilkes Booth. I mean, Oscar Pistorius was a pretty sharp fall from Paralympian champion / role model to spouse murderer. Robert Downey Jr. had a pretty destructive spell, incredible recovery though. Everyone is mentioning modern celebrities and forgetting historical standards. In all honesty, it's got to be John Wilkes Booth. The man was from a prestigious acting family and not only famous from his own skill and roles on stage, but became seriously wealthy too, and was in demand across the country. People knew him. He was 26 years old and a goddamn superstar. But he had sympathies with the Confederacy and planned to kidnap Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, with the help of conspirators to end the war more favorably. When they surrendered he was enraged, changed the plan to kill Lincoln and several high-ranking officials with the help of his conspirators, and make the South rise up and welcome him as a hero. And then he killed Lincoln. This wunderkind acting behemoth, barely past his mid-20s, with a famous family and a huge amount of prestige and wealth to his name, killed the President of the United States in the pursuit of a delusional belief that he could change the outcome of an already decided war. He not only dissolved his own reputation in an instant, as both the Union and the former Confederate States were left utterly horrified by his act, but was killed within 2 weeks of an extensive manhunt and took several hours to die a painful, humiliating death. And on top of that he removed a great reformer who could have positively rebuilt the former Confederate States and help eliminate the institutions left over, having him replaced with a more neutral leader who disagreed with the idea of Reconstruction and ended it prematurely, setting back the redevelopment of the South while also causing it to severely regress to such an extent that it still isn't fully resolved from the Civil War nearly 2 centuries later. That, friends, is the fastest, hardest, and most destructive downward spiral of a celebrity from their peak. Chris Benoit. I may not be a wrestling fan anymore, but damn, what a tragedy. Bill Cosby. He was America's favorite dad, stand-up comic, had several very successful TV shows, spokesman at colleges. Then poof. He's just a dirty, creepy guy who spikes your drink so he can get some. Ian Watkins went from frontman of a world-famous rock band to doing 30 years for child sex offenses. Alison Mack. https://en Wikipedia org/wiki/Alison_Mack Baprov =SFLA1 Aaron Hernandez. Played tight end for the New England Patriots. Fresh off a new contract. Killed his friend, found guilty, then took his own life during the appeal. T.J. Miller. Called a bomb threat on a train he was on when he was rejected by someone he was trying to flirt with. Gia Karanji. She started modeling in 1978 at age 18. Reached her peak in 1979 and was considered the supermodel. But by 1980 her career was already in steep decline due to her hardcore drug addiction alongside her erratic personality, making her a difficultly to work with. By 1981 her career was basically over at only age 21. She tried to make multiple comebacks but it never stuck and officially left the modeling industry for good in 1983. She ended up working as a store clerk and even a prostitute for some time, but in 1986 she ended up dying of AIDS at age 26, suspected to be caused by contaminated heroin needles. She was in such poor condition when she died, then when the doctors picked her up the skin fell off her back. No one in the fashion industry attended her funeral or even knew she had died. She fell just as quickly as she rose. In the end, no one she thought cared about her in New York ended up being there for her during her final months except for the friends she made in rehab. Though through the demise of Gia brought about the rise of Cindy Crawford. Cindy and Gia share a lot of resemblance, so many photographers would use her in place of Gia because she was far easier to work with. She was even nicknamed Baby Gia at the beginning of her career. Bam Margera for me. He looks horrible now, like his dad but worse. Wouldn't be surprised if I wake up one morning and he's dead. O.J. Simpson. Jussie Smollett. How about Antonio Brown? NFL superstar too. Oh boy. Just read the list. Amanda Bynes. Went from the girl next door cast in every teen movie to a conservatorship and addiction issues. Mason Greenwood. Went from being effectively the top young prospect at Man United to never touching a professional football field again. Fuck him. Edit. For those who don't know, Mason Greenwood was a young homegrown prospect for one of the biggest football teams in the world, being heralded as the next great for the team. That is, until one night his girlfriend came out with dozens of pictures, videos, texts, and audio files of Mason being an abusive monster. He's done. He's not exactly a list anymore, but Andy Dick has had one of the worst downward spirals I can think of. He is a pretty terrible / toxic person, so it's difficult to feel bad for him, but in the last few years he's become heavily involved in the IRL streaming community IP2, which is honestly a collection of the trashiest people in America. Andy is passed around between different IRL content creators as he brings them views and they supply him with drugs and he provides content with his crazy behavior. He has had several pretty nasty beatings and was once held against his will by a creator called Wappy who was abusive. Andy is basically a drug-addicted husk of a human. I felt like I needed a shower after watching some of the videos. That whole lifestyle is my idea of hell, but Andy recently was caught on stream sexually assaulting one of the IRL streamers, so it's basically impossible to feel sorry for him. Has everyone forgotten Charlie Sheen? Did #winning stop winning? What about Tiger Blood and a bevy of porn stars? He went down so hard they made a series vaguely based on it and cast him in the lead role. Roseanne did one of the fastest disappearing act that I can think of. Maybe not from his peak, but Michael Richards comes to mind. Massive role as Kramer in one of the most popular TV sitcoms of all time, and then, yikes. Just no coming back from this. Britney Spears. She then proceeded to get royally fucked over by the courts and essentially became her father's slave until recently. Technically Buddy Holly. Lindsay Lohan. Kurt Cobain. Formed Nirvana in '87, and went from playing record store gigs and dive bars in the late '80s to putting out Nevermind, a record that knocked Michael Jackson out of the #1 spot in Jan of '92. Back then, something like that was unheard of and considered impossible in the industry. For the next couple of years Nirvana were arguably one of the biggest and most popular rock bands in the world, but Cobain was already thinking of ways to essentially sabotage the band's popularity because he was so uncomfortable with how famous they got while dealing with his own inner demons and drug addiction. They performed at the Reading Festival in '92 in what many consider one of the great live rock performances of all time. Put out their second major studio album, In Utero in Feb of '93, that went to #1 instantly despite the record company originally thinking it was unreleasable and some major retailers refusing to sell it due to the album art and the song Rape Me. Performed their iconic MTV Unplugged set in November of '93, despite Cobain being in the heavy throes of heroin addiction and them not knowing if he'd be able to perform until showtime. In March of '94 he intentionally OD'd in Rome while on a European tour. Came back home, went to rehab for a couple of days, hopped the fence, and week later he blew his head off with a shotgun. Nirvana has sold over 75 million records worldwide despite only being a band for less than 7 years, and only releasing essentially 2 major label albums, Nevermind and In Utero, 1 indie album, Bleach, 1 album of B-sides, Incesticide, the MTV Unplugged album and a greatest hits album, Nirvana. I'd say that qualifies as a pretty destructive downward spiral, especially considering their ascent was so rapid as well. Elvis Presley. Chris Benoit. World famous and beloved wrestler who committed a double homicide, son and wife, suicide. Jan-Michael Vincent of Airwolf fame. His alcohol and drug abuse ruined a promising career and turned him into walking mummy towards the end. Edit * all the woe, this guy was real comments made me feel really old. Someone who was born into one of the most famous families in the world so would have anything he wanted. What he wanted was just that little bit too far. No sweating it. Come on down Prince Andrew. Will Smith went to winning the Oscar to be a meme in the same night. Amy Winehouse. The Hollywood of yesteryear had more than its fair share of career implosions such as Fatty Arbuckle and Harry Langdon, but few can match Wallace Reed. Described as the screen's most perfect lover, he was an all-round athlete and musician who wanted to move from theater to film. He approached Vitagraph Studios with a story hoping he could direct it, but the studio jumped on the opportunity to cast the 6-foot blue-eyed Reed as a matinee idol. By 1922, he had appeared in nearly 200 pictures and even tried out for the Indy 500. Reed was hiding a secret, however. In 1919, he had been involved in a train wreck and was prescribed morphine for his injuries. As the pressure of stardom grew, he rapidly became addicted, regularly spending $1,000 on morphine, but audiences noticed his rapid weight loss and gaunt features. He collapsed on set in October 1922 and was sent to a sanatorium where he was locked in a padded cell as he tried to detox. He died of influenza on January 19, 1923, and his death was a huge shock to the public, the first celebrity drug death. A wholesome one, not very fast but pretty destructive. Brendan Fraser. Star of The Mummy then got destroyed by his stunts and his divorce and had to pay his wife like $900K per year or something, got addicted to alcohol IRC. He's rebounding pretty great so far. Really likable guy, and he gets more and more roles again. Edit, forgot the stunts. Edit 2, and the sexual abuse he experienced. Shia LaBeouf went from popular actor to weirdo not one wanted to touch with a 10-foot touching pole pretty quick. Just do it. I would have to say Whitney Houston. I suspect many people here were either not alive or too young to remember how insanely big Houston was. She was literally the biggest female artist in the world and one of the biggest artists, and this was before social media. She holds the record for having 7 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Top 100, record sales of over 200 million, a host of awards including 28 Guinness World Records. The only other artist that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Whitney in regards to success would be Michael Jackson. However, between 2005 her entire career and life completely disintegrated. Her marriage to Bobby Brown, her addiction to crack, the car crash that was her own reality TV show utterly destroyed her career. She attempted a comeback in 2009/10 by doing a world tour, but it was painful to watch, to say the least. She was unable to hit high notes, she no longer had the range she had, many performances were cancelled, I think it was one in Australia which was an utter car crash. She made the audience wait for hours, and when she did appear she simply couldn't sing. Pretty much everyone booed her and she GTFO in a very short time. The general consensus was her tour was a major flop. She tried to come back a couple times afterwards, but she never got even close to her former glory. I have never seen somebody who arguably was the world's biggest artist fall so hard and fast as Whitney Houston. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you have enjoyed this video and subscribe to never miss an upload.